What up, folks? What it do? Welcome to another episode of the Best Advice Ever podcast with me, your host, comedian Mike Goodwin, aka the Bowtie Comedian. Happy to have y'all along on the journey, on the ride. This is my podcast, and what I do on this podcast is basically give you an opportunity to kill some time in a very hilarious, positive, and hopefully instructive manner. I'm here doing what I do for you. If you're on your commute, if you're on the Stairmaster getting in those steps, I want to make that process just a little bit easier. And that's the purpose of this podcast. I'm for you. I'm for the people. I'm here to serve. And as I say that, I just was serving in the fine city of Hilton Head, South Carolina, on the road. I was just on the road this past week. I was down in, again, the beautiful Hilton Head, South Carolina. I was doing an annual seminar for the South Carolina, let's get this right because I don't want to mess it up, School Boards Insurance Trust. So basically, these are folks that are over insurance policies and workman comp and risk evaluation for the majority of the school districts in the state, but not all the school districts. And they had a seminar and it was entitled Risky Business. So they wanted me to come and do my leadership and laughter keynote. A keynote that I really enjoy doing is probably one of my most, I guess, significant things in terms of what I've done with my career. My set is probably number one, but this keynote is top. It's probably number two because it's something I created. I created it, and I cultivated it, and I have been utilizing it and taking it and using it for corporations and organizations and schools. And it's been a hit. It's been well received. And I just recently spent some time down with the folks of the South Carolina Schools Boards Insurance Trust. So it's different members of different school boards that were there. And they talked about some tough topics that morning, especially the morning before I came up. I came up after lunch. Now, they were talking about active shooter scenarios. They were talking about risk management in schools, a lot of things, and how do you keep the school safe. That was the bulk of the content that morning. And I've done a presentation after someone talked about active shooting scenarios. And I shared my piece of advice. I'm going to share with you here on the podcast. Because nobody's going to share this. The experts aren't going to share this. This is some insights from a life of travel and experience. And so I shared with the group this morning. And this is what is so beautiful about having me as a part of your corporate events. Because I don't follow the rules. I'm not following the rules. I'm there for a specific purpose. That's to add value. That's to add humor. But I'm a wild card. You don't see anything I say coming. You don't have a clue. So the way that I opened my talk with the folks down in Hilton Head, I told them, I said, hey, I'm sure y'all covered some very important information as it relates to active shooting and scenarios of danger in schools. But I'm going to share with you a piece of advice that I'm sure that none of the experts would share. It's a gem that I would say 90% of the time will keep you safe. And the information and the advice that I gave them, and it's not even the best advice ever that I'm going to share today. This is just another nugget that I gave this audience. And I told them, if you ever find yourself, and you can use this too, out there listening, podcast listener, if you ever find yourself in a dangerous scenario, active shooting type scenario, follow the black people. Yeah. The black people will lead you to safety, man. I'm telling you, we are intuitive. We come into a spot looking for the exits. We have a spidey sense that, hey, something foul is afoot. Something is about to go down. Now, the only time that we don't fare well is when the active shooters are trying to shoot black people. Now that we don't have a fighter's chance in those scenarios. But if it's just a general, somebody is pissed off about being fired at the post office, or it's just a, hey man, I'm gonna get back at this organization, and it's not specific to black people, follow the black people. But if they are coming for the black people, you probably, if you're not black, you're probably not there. I know. This is terrible for me to joke about, but I am just keeping it 100 as the young people. I think the young people say. I don't know what the young people say anymore. But yeah, thank you so much for having me down at the Risky Business Seminar for the folks from the South Carolina Boards Insurance Corporation. No, Trust. Insurance Trust. And that has been my on the road situation. Now for one of my favorite segments of the podcast. My whole podcast is my favorite. I enjoy doing this, and I hope that you enjoy listening. But the next segment that I also enjoy presenting is the What You're Not Gonna Do segment. Now, there are things that I realize and I see in life that cause me to think someone needs to say something about that. And if you find yourself in a scenario where you need to really say something, you need to get someone's attention, just use the phrase that I use all the time. What you're not gonna do. Like mothers, if your son or daughter continuously leaves their room in disarray, you say, hey, before they walk out of the house or ask for the keys, you just tap them on the shoulder, just grab the shoulder, look at them in their eyes, squarely in the eyes. Say, what you're not gonna do is keep leaving your room looking like a traveling circus. That's what you're not gonna do. I mean, you could say whatever analogy or reference that you like to say, but you speak with a little authority, a little. You can't whisper. Hey, Sally, what you not gonna do? No, you got to say, you got to roll. What you're not gonna do, I say it with some emphasis. What you're not gonna do is keep running in and out of this house. That's what you're not gonna do. What I've realized recently, and I think that it's important for us to learn this lesson, and it's a lesson that I'm continuously learning, is what you're not going to do is not speak to the person that you have the most issue with. That's what you're not going to do. I'm seeing this a lot as it relates to family concepts, as it relates to family relationships. I see people talk to other people to carry the message to the person that they really want to talk to. Hey, tell Aunt Susie that she should not be. No, you tell Aunt Susie. What you're not going to do is sit in here like you are the king of a fiefdom, and that you could just send out decrees. have the wherewithal, have the chutzpah, the gall to communicate the message that you want to communicate to the person that you want to communicate it to, and Mike Goodwin included. I'm going to have to, personally, in my life, have some hard truths, have some difficult conversations with some people, that it would be so much easier to have someone else tell this person information as opposed to me being the person that tells the information. So what you're not going to do is avoid having tough conversations, tough communication. Now, I think that is a key component to being an adult, to maturing, right? I think that there is, especially in today's age, such a tendency to want to avoid conflict. And conflict in and of itself doesn't have to be negative. Conflict can be very productive. I'm learning that just because there's conflict, it doesn't have to be combative, right? It doesn't have to be aggressive. I can be firm. I can be compassionate. I can be loving in the conflict. And that's something that I haven't been great about over the course of my life. I've always come from the conflict position of war. I'm like, if we're having conflict, we're having a Vietnam type conflict. We're not having a diplomatic, have a seat at the UN table conflict where we just are speaking to one another about rules and resolutions. Now, if I have conflict, I'm in the jungle, face paint, machete, and M16 in hand. And that has not served me well. You know, sometimes people will say, so how's that working for you? That it's not. It has not ever worked for me. And so I realized that, and I'm making the adjustment. I often tell my sister, you know, I talk to her pretty regularly about kind of like my evolution, the evolution of Mike Goodwin. And if you know me personally, I'm a far kinder, gentler version of myself than I was, say, 10 years ago, 15 years ago. In times past, I was a tyrant or had tyrant-like disposition, right? I had a very shoot first, ask questions later. I was very to the point, jugular. I'm coming for your jugular, and it was a right or wrong. Winner takes all type of a position, and that's just for a number of reasons. There's just a number of reasons that I chose violence. If I woke up and I was presented with a scenario, I chose violence every time, even in my disposition. Maybe even if not one punch was thrown or any bodily harm was sustained, I still chose violence as a way to overwhelm the person. Because that's how I was trained. I was trained in the arts of chaotic confrontation. That's just what I knew. You know, I think I've made this analogy before about Bane. Like, I was born in it. I was shaped and molded by chaotic confrontation. I literally can remember and I don't know, maybe I'll get a visit from Peter or someone. But I literally remember as a child, we would have dogs, and they were not the type of dogs that folks have now, like when they have Instagram pages and there are bill of sales and there are shot records. Those are not the type of dogs that we had. I don't. This is a derogatory term. I don't even know if I can say the term anymore. It's 2022. Can we call dogs mutts, or has there been a movement that says down with mutts? The new term is doggy unidentified, a breed unidentified. You can't call them mutts. You gotta call them UDs, unidentified. I don't know where the D came from. It's UIs. But we had mutts, man. That's the type of dog and I don't even know how we would get the dog. I don't know if someone went and got the dog from a place. Maybe it was a dog where we would leave food out in a bowl and the dog would come by more than 3 days, and after that we put him on a chain and put him in the backyard. I don't know. I don't ever remember going to a place, getting a dog. I remember the dog and having the dog. We had one dog named Flash. Dog, I remember young Flash. It was a little black dog. It's the only one I can think about right now. But there's a number of dogs that have been in our residence, not in the residence, at our house, because we were not the inside the house dog family. We were backyard dog family, right? But I remember vividly as a child having a dog, and when you would feed a dog, because the information I was given that you gotta make the dog tough. You gotta toughen the dog up. You gotta make him a little angry. So you would feed the dog, and then you would just put your foot beside the bowl. So the dog's just having the time. It's like eating the food, but then you creep your foot by it, and the dog's like, "Arr." You creep your foot a little closer. Arr. Then you get too close, and they really attack your foot. But I forgot there was terminology that we used to like make the dog tough. You got to mess with the dog while he's eating his food. And I felt like that was what someone did to me my entire childhood. Like I was just like I just couldn't be comfortable. So that's why I've chose violence. But I'm making an adjustment. I'm looking at the man in the mirror. I've decided to change my ways. So what I'm not going to do is, even though I may have conflict to address, I don't have to address it with the sword. I can address it with diplomacy. Yeah, I address it with the snacks as opposed to the sword. But what you're not going to do is a segment I enjoy. And there's some news topics that I often see. So here's one from Lincoln, Nebraska. An investigation into the theft of this summer's several semi-trailers loaded with frozen beef from the state has led to arrest and uncovered a multi-million-dollar theft ring targeting meat packaging plants in 6 Midwestern states. Federal authorities said this is in Lincoln, Nebraska. Folks out here stealing the meat. The first thing I thought about when I read that story is, where's the beef? That was a Wendy's commercial back in the 80s, I believe, where they were kind of comparing different fast food restaurants. And so the woman would drive up. It was a little elderly white woman to drive up to the fast food restaurant, and they would give her the burger, and she'd look at it and say, where's the beef? And that's what I'm thinking about. These folks out here stealing frozen beef. Come on, man. What are we doing? What are we doing? Here's another story I found to be quite interesting. This is in New Jersey, Toms River. A red-tailed hawk that flew into a branch of the Ocean County Library continued to elude capture Thursday and forced the library to close early. Can you imagine hanging out in the library, working on your thesis, and a red-tailed hawk just, I don't know if that's the noise that the hawks make. You are in there working on your trigonometry homework. Patrons of the library, unfortunately, we will have to close early due to the fact that there is a red-tailed hawk terrorizing our patrons. Come on, New Jersey. What you're not going to do is not have a tranquilizer behind the desk. You should have everything at a library. I'm talking about you should have a marksman. There should be a librarian that is a marksman level shot. Because you got to put people to sleep in the library, man. Sometimes folks get a little unruly, a little belligerent. You got to hit them with the tranquilizer, man. I would approve of this. I would approve of training librarians that have tranquilizer guns in the branches. So when hawks or drunk people or folks that just come in and show their natural born behind, you're like, okay, sir, could you walk a little closer? You know, with that tranquilizer gun. Have it locked and look. I think they should have those in banks. Folks out here robbing banks, they should be like inside of the wood. So when the folks come up to the teller, there should be like there's a little opening that you just move and you hit a button and a little tranquilizer needle go right out into the thigh area. What are you talking about? Give me the money. I probably should have went into security. That's what I think. I've missed my calling, man. I'll keep you safe. My good one will keep you safe. You can guarantee that. You hear that? You hear that hawk? Now we meant to. There's no safe landing, and you get tranquilized in the sky. There's no safe landing for that. All right, folks. We have reached the segment of the podcast in which this podcast is named for. The Best Advice Ever podcast. Well, I'm about to share with you a piece of advice that I would deem as some of the best advice ever that I've received. And it's a simple, I guess, a phrase or a statement. And I use it also in my leadership and laughter keynote presentation from time to time. But the phrase is, if you want to go fast, go alone. But if you want to go far, go together. And that's the advice for the Best Advice podcast ever today. If you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And so there are times in life where you need to go alone and you need to go fast. I did that. There's been tremendous examples of me needing to go fast, so I went alone. That's what I did when I joined the Army. I joined the Army. I told you the story of how I came to the decision to join the Army. But I joined the Army and it was just me. I didn't, there are many, I've heard stories of folks that joined the Army with a buddy, that joined the Army with a friend. They both were talking and it was like, hey, I was going in the military. Oh, I'm going in the military too. Let's do it together. Let's go on the buddy pass. I didn't go on the buddy pass. I went alone because I wanted to go fast. I knew that I needed to leave my environment. I just internally knew that there was a ceiling for what I wanted to accomplish in my life that would prevent me from accomplishing it if I stayed in my hometown. I wasn't by any means or any stretch running with the wrong crowd. I wasn't that guy. I wasn't running with the wrong crowd. I wasn't doing things that were detriment to my future. I wasn't doing anything that if I stayed in Camden, the outcome would have been disastrous. That wasn't the case. I just knew that if I stayed in Camden, I couldn't go fast. And I wanted to go fast. I wanted to go light speed fast. Like I had a vision for what I wanted life to look like, and I knew that could not take place where I was. And I didn't need it to happen incrementally. I needed to happen in the snap of an eye. I just knew that, number one, I didn't see a future for myself in my hometown. I didn't necessarily see a future for myself separate from wanting to go to college. That was the future. That was the aspiration. I knew I wanted to go to college and be in college as a full functioning college student. At that moment in my life, that was the vision. I didn't want to go to college and have to work a full-time job, sorta. I didn't want to go to college as a commuter. I didn't want to go to college just to take classes and then I would live at home and I would go back and forth from my hometown to Orangeburg. I knew that wasn't what I wanted. I had a vision. I saw folks playing hacky sack on the lawn. I saw folks sitting under trees reading books. In my brain, college looked like a portion of a different world where they were Mr. Gaines in the cafeteria, and there were fraternities and sororities, and there were very difficult professors that you would have to take. And there were late night study sessions. And I had a vision for these things, and I knew I could not attain them in my hometown. And I had to go fast. So if you want to go fast, you got to go alone sometimes. You have to figure out what it is that you're aiming for. And then once you get those coordinates in your sights, you got to go fast. You can't walk. You can't lollygag. You got to get it. And so that first part of the best advice ever, there are moments in life where you got to go fast. When I went to college, so once I made it through the Army experience, I went to college and I knew I had to go fast. Because again, I think one thing about me, at every point in my life, I've never had the picture has gotten clearer the older I've gotten. So when I was 18, I just knew I wanted to go to college. I didn't have a specific college. At one time I did, but I wasn't a good enough student. And it really is embarrassing because you didn't have to be that great of a student to get in this particular college. But I was a trash student. Academically, trash. I'm talking about on the curb in green garbage cans, trash. And that was simply because of execution. It wasn't because of ability or potential. Just the numbers don't lie. Say men lie, women lie. Numbers don't lie. So if you look at my transcript and you judge me by my transcript, you would say he was a very underwhelming student. Academic people don't say words like trash. They're not going to say. The admissions office at a college, like, this is a trash applicant. They don't do that. They don't do that. We will not be okay with that. But I knew I was trash. So I always had a vision of where I wanted to go, what I wanted to do. So after high school, I wanted to go to college, but I wanted to go to college I wanted to experience college in a very collegial manner. I wanted to be all the things, like they say, I wanted to live in the dorm. I spent 4 years on campus as a college student. I never wanted to live off campus. I worked as a resident assistant for 3 of those years. I think I might have been an RA my second semester of my freshman year. Now we gotta go back and check the records. If I wasn't, maybe I wasn't. Maybe I started my sophomore year as a resident assistant. But I had no desire to get off campus. My boy, Trey Brave, he was off campus the 4th week of school, I would think. That guy had an apartment before we got our books from the bookstore, I think. So I would go and vicariously live off campus over at his crib, but I was not in any way, shape, or form trying to move myself off of the yard. I was going to spend 4 years in the dorms, was committed to dorm room living. And so that was so I had those types of visions of what I wanted out of my life. And it wasn't always particularly clear, but I always had a big goal that I was moving towards. I wanted to go to college. Then after that, I wanted to go to graduate school. Wasn't all the way certain of what I knew what a master's degree program I was in, but I didn't know what program I wanted to work in. So I have a master's in higher ed administration, student personnel services. It depends on the program that we're talking about. But the goal that I was trying to accomplish was to work on a college campus. At some point, I had the conversation. I started off my freshman year. I majored in exercise science. I thought I was going to become a personal physical trainer, more so like a person that was a strength and conditioning type person, or someone who worked with sports teams. I was wrapping ankles and making ice bags. Like that was, I thought, kind of where I wanted to land. I wanted to land, but I wasn't even clear there. I didn't understand, strength and conditioning programs at that time. I knew I think vaguely I knew I wanted to work with sports teams, whether that's college or pro. That's kind of where I was floating. Then that first semester, they took me down to the training room, and all we did was wrap ankles and make ice bags and do these type of muscle relaxation activity. I was like, no, man, I can't be in a training room. And at this point, especially freshman year, we were kind of interning with different sports teams. So I was working, I think, with the soccer team, and we wasn't even that good to wrap ankles. So we really wasn't wrapping the ankles of the athletes. We were kind of practicing on each other. And the more senior students or the upperclassmen were actually wrapping the ankles, or the professional sports trainer that the school had hired. That's the person who was doing it. So at that moment, I was just getting coffee for the most part. I was doing the version of getting coffee in dry cleaning in sports exercise science. So I just didn't really have a full grasp of what that looked like. So I got a little disillusioned. I was like, man, I want to work with people. I don't want to just be putting ice in bags and setting up the training room and taking carts to the practice fields. I couldn't see beyond what I actually was doing at the time. So I was like, oh man, I need to change my major. And at this point, I knew some folks that were political science majors. I was in my brain thinking I was going to get into a life of advocacy, work with establishing laws and advocating for the disadvantaged and the underrepresented. I kind of maybe somewhere along that mindset of working in corporations and working in law. So I kind of gravitated to, okay, political science, possibly go to law school. But then that didn't come into fruition. But that's another story for another day. But what I really want to communicate is that if you want to go fast, go alone. You have to go alone. It reminds me of the story. I ran track in high school, and so we had the different track meets at the time. There was something called the Spring Valley Invitational. Spring Valley High School is a pretty big high school here in the state of South Carolina and Columbia. Shout out to, I think they are the Spring Valley Vikings, if I'm not mistaken. And so my freshman year, I joined the track team with Coach Stratford. Now, Coach Stratford was one of my all-time favorite teachers and coaches. If you know Coach Stratford, I could imitate Coach Stratford to a T. People, even in comedy, people often ask me, do I do voices? I don't do voices. I do voices of people that I know and that I spend time around. And I really haven't done it a lot over the years, but when I started comedy, but as a younger person, I would just emulate teachers. And Coach Stratford had this very interesting voice. I think Coach Stratford is from South Carolina, but he didn't say the word practice. He used to say practica. And I haven't done his voice in a while, so I'm gonna try. Hey, you guys, I don't understand. You need to come out to practica. I don't know why you guys don't want to come to practica. You want to smoke the dope, you want to drink the booze, but you want to come out to practica. You got to come to practica. If you want to run well in the meet, you got to come to practica. So that's Coach Stratford. If you don't know Coach Stratford, hopefully that sounds like a rest in peace, Coach. But Coach Henry Stratford, was the track coach my freshman year, and he would really, he was a very interesting guy. He wasn't a yelling, screaming kind of guy, but Coach really, I think, started me under the mindset of the growth mindset, because Coach was always telling you could do more than what you were doing. Like, so when you joined the track team at our school, I don't know how other schools were, but you just couldn't run one event. Maybe if you were like a football player, you could come out and maybe just run sprints, but those guys didn't really last long on the track team. Like, we would have like fast football players come out, but they would not make a whole season because Coach didn't care to have you just in one event. Now, the event that you could just do those events was the shot put and discus. Like, if you're doing shot put and discus, you didn't have to do running events. But if you were a runner, you were running multiple events. So when I first started, I was long distance. So I would run the mile and the 2 mile. And if you ran things lower than the mile, he would have you running the 800, the 200. You may be on a couple of relay teams, but then he would even have you in some field events. So I ran the mile, the 2 mile, and I jumped the high jump. Coach didn't care. Coach, you were going to do multiple things. So, Coach, I was just, if you were going to be on the team, you just weren't going to run the mile and then just chill. Like, you're going to run the mile, you're going to run the 2 mile, and then you need to find a field event. So I was jumping high jump. And I remember the Spring Valley Invitation. This is talking about if you want to go along, go fast. And in track and field, unless you're running on the relay team, you're going alone. You are all by yourself. And so Coach, I found this out later, Coach would sign us up for these invitationals that we didn't qualify for, because the invitational, it has it in, you have to be invited. And so there was a prerequisite time that you had to have ran to make it into these races. And I never run track before. So I get to practice, and Coach like, yeah, you go run the mile and the 2 mile and the Spring Valley Invitational. I didn't know that these were some of the best runners in the state. I did not know this. So I get to the Spring Valley Invitational. And I get on that line and I'm running the mile. And I'm gonna tell you this at the beginning. I ran the best time I ever ran. There might have been 30 contestants on that line, 30 race runners. And when I was done, it was the fastest I had ever run. I mean, I'm talking about by maybe even 30 seconds. Like I was sub 500. I think I ran a 5:26, if I'm not mistaken. Maybe it was something close to a 5:30. And I think before that, my best time may have been 5:50, maybe more 6. But this particular day, let's just say we could probably go back and find it. But let's say I ran a 5:24. Best time I've ever ran in the Spring Valley Invitational. And I came in dead last. Yes, sir. Dead last. I'm talking about last with people clapping last. Like not last like me and a guy at the end were kind of battling for. No. All the runners have been done. They've been finished. They ready for the next race. And they like, oh no, it's a cat with glasses on out there running really, really fast. But there's nobody else out there with him. And I always think about that, especially when I talk to young people, because sometimes folks are like, their best is good enough. And I'm like, no. Sometimes your best is not good enough. Sometimes your best is the worst of the best. And that was my experience with the Spring Valley Invitation. I went fast. People, this is the fastest I've ever run. It was dead last. And that gave me great perspective on what I thought my skill set was and what others needed. So there's times where I am the best, but I'm not the best for this particular opportunity. So if you want to go fast, go alone. But if you want to go far, go together. And basically the go together part is you have to build a team. For whatever reason, in business, in life, we want to go fast. And even if we don't want to go fast, we want to go alone. But I'm here to tell you, if you want to go far, you have to go together. You have to build a team. If you want sustained success, build a team. My pastor says, he used the analogy of driving a bus. He's driving the bus and he wants the right people on the bus. And if the people need to get off and people need to get on, he's fine with that, but he's going to keep driving the bus. And so I would encourage you, if you want to go far, you got to go together. You need to build a team. You need to collect allies and support. And you need to collect resources, human capital. You need to help. You need help. You cannot go far alone. You can go far fast, but you can't go as far as you can go if you were with a team. And so hopefully what I shared today has resonated with you as it relates to the best advice ever. Build a team. If you want to go far, go together. I think about, like, I'm a huge basketball fan. And in barbershop conversations, online debates, folks are always going to talk about who's the GOAT. LeBron, MJ, Kobe. But no one asks who was the glue. Dennis Rodman, Joe Dumars, Derek Fisher, who was the glue? We always want to talk about the GOAT. Who's the glue? You know, the glue's the team. The glue is the folks that you assemble around you to make you the GOAT. It's my desire that you are the GOAT, that you're the GOAT in whatever endeavor that you're in. I want to be the GOAT, but I want glue. I want some stuff that could keep this thing together. So you need a team. You need to figure out who are the unsung heroes. What are some responsibilities that you need to get off your plate so that you can do more GOAT-like activity? A lot of times, I'm in this particular predicament now. I'm doing low income generating things because I've always done them. But what I need to do is develop the team so that I can have other people do the things that will allow me to focus on the things that the GOATs focus on. I was having a conversation with a family member this weekend, and I really didn't know how to say this when I was talking to the person. But what I thought about after the conversation was this particular person wanted me to do mailroom activities, and I'm in the C-suite. And the person was saying, like, why don't you come down from the C-suite to check on the mailroom folks? Or not even to check on the mailroom, to work in the mailroom. And I didn't know how to say that, hey, I'm far beyond working in the mailroom. Like I'm thinking about how can I improve the organization for the folks that work in the mailroom, for the folks that work on the 4th floor, the 3rd floor, whatever floor. Like I'm at the C-suite level. I'm at the level where what I'm doing and what I'm creating and thinking about, I don't know what slot that magazines go in. I have no desire to know how much postage costs. But that seems insensitive, right? That seems as though you cold-hearted. Cold-hearted player looking through his eyes. I don't know what song that is, but you seem like you don't have any sympathy and empathy when you say, "Hey, man, I don't work in the mailroom. I'm not going to. I have no desire to. I'm at the C-suite. I'm thinking at a level that generates wealth. I'm not trying to keep a job." So today's the best advice ever. Hey, if you want to go fast, go alone. And there are times that you need to go fast and you need to go alone. But if you want to go far, go together. Build your team. And hopefully that resonated with you today, because that was the best advice ever on the Best Advice Ever podcast. We have reached the segment called Ask the Bowtie. If you want to send in a question, please email your questions at info at comedianmikegoodwin.com. Again, that's info at comedianmikegoodwin.com, and just put the subject, Ask the Bowtie. So today's question, I have time for one. And the question is, how did you get into doing keynote presentations? Excellent question from Sarah in Greencastle, Indiana. Sarah, great question. Thank you so much for asking. How did I get into doing keynote presentations? Basically, what happened, I need to come back. I'm going to do this in the future. I'm going to tell you my first keynote experience. And that experience caused me to say, no, I'm not a keynote speaker. So I'm not gonna tell that story now, but I'll make a note to revisit telling that story in the future. But what caused me to get into doing keynotes as of late, or within the last 5 to 6 years, was as you know, I'm a clean comedian. I do clean comedy, or my comedy is clean. I think I do comedy, and by virtue of who I am, it comes out in a clean type of way. So, but anyway, I over the course of my career started getting invited to do corporate opportunities, corporate shows, corporate events. I was doing luncheons and seminars and workshops and retreats for organizations. And I would come in and I would do my set. I would come in and do comedy as a segment of their program. So it's after lunch, I would do comedy. So it wasn't a presentation or by any sorts. It was just like, hey, most times when folks introduce a comedian, they'll say, hey, we wanted to do something a little bit different. Wanted to try something new. And so I was doing comedy, doing a 30-minute set, 15-minute set, 20-minute set in these corporate environments. And so this woman approaches me after one of my presentations or one of my comedy sets at a corporate event, and basically said, hey, Mike, I really enjoy your set, your comedy. I've watched you. I've seen you at least a few times at these events. And she asked me, hey, I wanted to know, do you do any speaking? Do you do any keynote speaking? Now, at this moment in time, I did no keynote speak. I was a comedian. I was funny man Mike. That's all I was wanting to do, trying to do. You can hire me. I'm coming and I'm telling these jokes. But because I am mindful of having to feed 3 mouths, 4, including mine, I was interested in what she had in mind. So I said, yeah, I kind of was like, I'm sure I could meet whatever requirement that you asked. I basically was like, well, what are you thinking about? Because I don't think I said yes or no. I just said, oh, that sounds interesting. What are you thinking about? So she explained to me that she was a social worker in North Carolina. She was having a full-day conference, and she wanted to have me to close out the conference with some comedy, but she wanted some content. She wanted to have comedy and substance, comedy and content, so that folks just wouldn't leave on a down note, that they just wouldn't get in their car after a full day of talking about neglect and abuse and all these type of topics. And so she told me when the date of the event, it was some months away, and I'm a college educated guy. I'm sure I could figure this thing out. So I said, yeah, let me go back and look at my notes and see what I can put together for you. And I did that. I went back, and so that's how I got started doing my keynote. And I'll share the story of the evolution, because it evolved from the way I started it to the way I do it now. Again, I was just in Hilton Head doing that presentation that was started from this woman that asked me about that. And at that moment, I think she might have approached me. I think it might have been in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, if I'm remembering correctly, when she asked me about the keynote. And now I've cultivated and developed this keynote that I'm very proud of, and I think it's very impactful when organizations have me in. So hopefully that answered your question. Someone asked me, did I do something? And I wasn't doing it yet, so I went and did it. So for the entrepreneurs that are listening to this, solve a problem, and guess what happens? You make money. Money will find you. If you solve a problem, the money will show up. And oftentimes, my own life as an entrepreneur, I went and just created something and hoped and wished and prayed that somebody would pay me for it. And that's not the optimal way to get paid. The optimal way is to figure out what people are struggling with. What problems do people have? You go solve that problem, the money will beat down your door. So thank y'all so much for tuning in to another episode of the Best Advice Ever podcast. I'm your host, Mike Goodwin. If you want to follow me, I would love for you to subscribe and to rate this podcast at all the places where you can rate it. Share it. Tell people about it. You can follow me on my social media platforms at Comedian Mike Goodwin on Facebook, on Instagram, and Twitter. I'm at Bowtie Comedy. You can find these episodes also on YouTube on my Comedian Mike Goodwin's page. You can go to my website, MikeGoodwin.com, and please join my email list so you can stay abreast to all the comings and goings that I have going on. So again, thank you. This has been another episode of the Best Advice Ever podcast. And I thank you for listening, because you could be anywhere or listen to any other podcast in the world, but you're here with me, and I really appreciate it. I'm Mike Goodwin.